What we have here, this is clay from Monster Makers. It's called Monster Clay. It is an oil-based clay, so it won't dry out. It's pretty waxy, and it has a very low melt temperature. I've kind of turned half of this to soup, which has kept this other part really soft. And in order to keep it workable while it's at my table, I have a regular old desk lamp with a 100-watt bulb that I just put as close as I want to it in order to keep the clay at the temperature I want. If this were not warm, it would be very firm, and I don't want it to be firm because I want to try and get some rough shape. In order to get detail, I want the firmness. Whenever I'm sculpting really small things like teeth or the things like bird skulls that I'm doing right now, I definitely want a firmer clay. But I want it soft now so I can go ahead and start shaping it. What I'm making is accent pieces for my witch costumes and possibly for some voodoo-themed deranged masks down the line. I know what I want to sculpt. Always know what you want to sculpt so you don't waste time. On my computer here, I have a list of what I want to sculpt, and I have a window open with the Google image search so I can have references right here next to me. If you're using water-based clay, you might want to keep your computer a little bit further away, just for safety reasons. I know I need chicken feet, bird skulls, curved boar tusks, that kind of stuff. I'm going to start by sculpting a quick bird skull. And I have my pan right here to put my sculpts in because that's where I'm going to do my mold. Just like the plaster mold, only this one's going to be silicone. And I'm just roughing out my bird skull shape. And I figure that these are going to hang off of belts and such. I am roughing out kind of a bird raven skull. And I got the basic shape down, but the clay is still very soft. It's not going to hold details. So I'm going to move on, set this aside, and come back, and I'll detail that later. So I'm going to start sculpting something else, and it looks like I need a chicken foot. And it looks like Morgan has a chicken foot started. And again, I have roughed out my chicken foot, and now I need to let it cool. And I think on the list I had a little skull. I will do a little stylized skull. Okay, what I'm going for here is a stylized voodoo-esque witchy belt type thing. So I'm not going to sculpt an actual miniature skull. I want to do a stylized representation. And once again, I won't be able to get my final details in here because the clay is just too soft. But I can get my basic structures in. And I definitely want to have that voodoo type feel to this. I get a lot of mileage out of one of these just little stylus tools. I use the back end to poke in my eyes and the needle for everything else on this piece. So I've used the back end of this tool to rough out the eyes, and I have used the pointy end to just rough in these teeth. Because I know I want to make this for a necklace or for a belt, I want to go ahead and add that tab right now up top to attach it. I'm just going to use the back of my tool to push through. If I went all the way through this piece, then when I molded it, I couldn't get the silicone out. I'd have to rip it or cut it. If I only go part of the way through, I know that'll pull clear, and I'll be able to get it out of the mold and just push out this little thin bit of resin. That's where I'm planning for flash. This tool will not cut it to meld these two together, so I'm moving on to something else. little piece of wire, and I'm just separating this from the board I'm on. Let that cool. I'm going to rough out an eyeball holder. This is an eyeball blank. You can get them off eBay. You can also buy them from Biddy Mold Supply. They're pretty awesome. I'm going to do a little stylized holder for it. So I'm not going to leave this in when I mold. I'm going to take this out and just mold the frame that I'm making. That way I can pop any one of these into one of these cast pieces. I'm just working with my clay so it's all one temperature. I'm going to go ahead and frame this eye. Going to use a little wooden tool to push it down around the eye so more of the eye is exposed. I'm going to put some filigree and such on this when it gets cooler, and it'll hold that level of detail. The witches that I'm doing for the Maze of the Minotaur are Stygian witches, so they have kind of an eye motif with a lot of their stuff. Once again, I'm just putting a hanger on for it. And a hole most of the way through. That's a nice, easy drill guide down the road. Once these are cast, I can put a drill bit in there and quickly go through. And I'll get more details on that as soon as it cools down. I'm popping the eye out now. So I just have the holder, and I can put any eye that I buy into a new holder that I molded. I'm just going to leave it in there while it cools, but I want to make sure it's free and I'll be able to get it out later. I have my bird skull. It is now much firmer. Now I can hold it by the beak and it really doesn't droop. Before it would have kind of folded over on itself. And I'm looking for the right tool now to separate it. What I have in my head is a popsicle stick. So I'm looking for something popsicle stick like, and this tool will work. I'm going to push the clay in order to make a ridge, because the beak is a separate part of the skull. And I want to separate those by pushing that ridge into it. I also want to put some lines underneath these eye bones, these eye sockets, to accentuate. Smooth those out a bit. I'm going to press in a zygotal arch with this tool. Pushing in the zygotal arch reinforces the eye socket and adds a cheekbone. this is going to be a prop that hangs from a witch's belt, and I'm going to work on it to that level. I'm not trying to win an Oscar with this, so I'm not going to spend 6 hours sculpting it. But I do want it to be a fun piece. So I'm doing some little skull cracks on this guy. That's just going to be a bit of detail. I'm using the heat from my fingers more than touching with my fingers to smooth this guy out, because this clay is very waxy and it's very heat sensitive. I'm now using the needle to just make some scratch marks in this beak so that the beak has a different texture than the skull part. I'm now done shaping this bird skull. I'm going to put it in the pot. I'm going to pull out my chicken foot. I'm going to round these out just by squeezing them, pushing them together, because I just laid mine and cut it with a wire to get my 3 separate toes. And these are very scaled. Chicken feet are kind of scaly, almost like dinosaur feet. And I'm going to put that in with this tool. It's got a little curved lip, comes in a regular set. I can just go around and put in this texture. In the same way I separated the crow's beak by pushing up, I'm pushing up and forcing a cuticle on the end here to make these individual claws. I just saw the diamond rough texture on this tool, and I'm going to see what rolling it looks like. And yeah, I really like the texture that that's giving it. So I found a faster, easier way to make my chicken foot more chicken foot-like. The smaller the detail, the further along in the process you want to do it. The only thing I have to do is tip these claws aside from this texture. So I'm saving making the claws sharp really for the very last, because that is such a small detail. I'm just chewing up the end of this so it's not a nice, neat, cut, rolled chicken foot end. It's going to be a little bit nasty. And once again, because I know I'm going to want to hang this off of stuff, I'm putting a hole part of the way through it. That's going to be real easy for a drill bit to catch and just finish making that hole. If I didn't do that, I would have a round chicken foot that's a little hard to drill. My last thing, squeezing these claws to a point. Chicken foot. Alright, this piece just about done. Okay, I just detailed out my eye, so it's got a little bit of detail on it, my eye holder. I'm going to carefully pop the eye out. This will maintain its shape. And in the pan, when that fills with silicone, it'll leave a perfect frame for me to slip an eye into next go round. I'm going to try and tackle a shrew skull. I now have my tray full of sculptures. I've arranged them where I want them. And next step is going to be mixing silicone.